This is your weekly recovery message. This week I thought I would talk about the topic of lust. When we look at lust, it really is a physiological craving or desire. At its most core, it's a physiological craving for sexual gratification and release or relief. But lust can be a complicated picture because sometimes we crave that sexual gratification potentially for other reasons, which may mean we're looking for relief from boredom, we're looking for relief from loneliness, or we may be looking for relief from just not feeling comfortable being with ourselves or liking ourselves. So shame, issues with self-esteem and self-image. And so sex becomes a go-to to cover that up and to escape and distract us from that difficult relationship with self. A lot of people believe, I have clients, men and women alike, who come in and say they have just a higher than average level of lust, and so they believe that that's just a core part of who they are, and they act out on that. So that may look like sex quite regularly with the same partner. It may look like sex with multiple partners or other partners if they don't find or feel that they're getting the gratification that they need from their main partner. And it may also mean self-gratification. So people may act out with masturbation daily, even multiple times daily, up to, a couple times a day to 10 times a day to even 30 times a day. This does happen. And when we look at lust through that very narrow lens of the sexual gratification piece, it brings up the question, do people have that higher than normal level of libido and sexual desire? Or is this part of addiction and part of that growing tolerance? Option number one, is that just a natural thing? Well, I'm not sure. I actually tend to look at it more through the second lens because that's often what I see is people feeding into and building on that lust. So if someone is acting out on that lust regularly, that is going to impact the brain, and that is going to come with the idea or the notion that there's a higher than average level of lust and sexual desire there. But what about tolerance? So when we're feeding into that behavior, we do increase the pleasure threshold at which we experience pleasure and sexual gratification. So it then becomes that pursuit of more, and the brain needing more and more of that stimulation to find that pleasure and also to find that relief or release, even though it really is more about relief. I would encourage you to look at your own relationship with lust and just be curious, act as a bit of an investigator. If you do fall into that second camp, that you believe you have that higher than average level of lust, look at your behavior to see if that may be playing a role. Because if you are acting out regularly in that lust, then it is difficult to know if that's just your natural baseline or if there's been the activity is actually promoting that sensation. If you give yourself a window of time to detoxify, then that will also give you some clarity as to how attached you are to sexual acting out, whether with self or others. So this detoxification period, I would recommend at least 3 months of that to really give the brain a chance to regroup and reset. After that 3 months detoxification, then you'll really get a sense of what your baseline is. Sure, after 3 months, you may not be quite at your natural baseline, but you'll definitely have a more accurate idea than when you were acting out 3 months ago regularly to see where your level of lust truly is. And again, at that point, you may be able to connect to not just lust, not just that wanting sexual relief or gratification, but you may be able to connect to sexual intimacy, which is when we connect our emotional world with sex and love with somebody else. And that's what we're aiming for in healthy relationships, is we don't want to just compartmentalize lust and sex and separate emotional intimacy. We want them all combined. And I think that's what can create a lot of disconnect in relationships, that one partner may be looking more for the sexual relief and gratification, but not engaging or fueling the emotional intimacy. And that can be confusing as well as isolating for the other partner. I've been talking more about lust on the kind of binging and the activity side of the spectrum, but there are people on the anorexic side of the spectrum who have pretty much completely, or at least somewhat, disconnected from their internal sex drive and really have limited idea of what pleasures them, what intrigues them, what attracts them. And so for people on the sexual anorexic side, it is important to take some time to really start to tentatively explore through reflection, through observation initially, what you are attracted to, what does fuel that sense of some attraction and a little bit of that sexual desire. Some people have turned that off through experiences and trauma and programming. And so again, for healthy relationship, if you would like sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy to combine, then obviously you need to have some awareness of what sexual intimacy looks like and feels like, and is about for you. So there's lots to explore in this realm, and I've done a few different videos on addiction involving sex. It's a complicated picture, and it really does tap into lots of other elements of addiction, including relationship with other people and a lot about relationship with self. So how people feel about themselves and also their relationship with the disease. A lot of people view this sexual behavior as very separate from addiction, but just remember that addiction is rooted in that core reward circuitry of the brain, which is inherently designed to control our basic desires for survival. So that's food as well as sex. So if you are aware that you have addiction involving substances, but you haven't yet explored addiction involving sex, I would really encourage you, when you feel ready and able to start incorporating that into your recovery, because it is something that is often a symptom of addiction for people even before substances or other behaviors come into play. And it is something that continues throughout active addiction, and it also can continue into recovery. So you're worth it. You deserve to know all the different ways that addiction may be impacting you, and looking at addiction involving sex is a very important part of that. I wish you all the best in your ongoing journey of exploration. Take care and bye for now.